When I met Nathan Hale, I thought I had finally found someone who saw me for more than what I had. He was charming, ambitious, and always spoke like he had the whole world figured out. My dad had passed away a few months before, and I was still trying to pull myself together when Nathan came into my life. He supported me, comforted me, and told me he wanted to build a future with me. For the first time in a long while, I believed someone truly cared. After my dad's death, I received an inheritance, money my father had worked for his whole life. It wasn't just money to me, it was a part of him, his dreams for my future. I wanted to use it to buy a small house, maybe start a business, something meaningful. But Nathan had bigger ideas. He said he could invest it, double it in a few years, and help me live the life my father wanted. He sounded confident, so I trusted him. At first, everything seemed fine. Nathan talked about meetings, clients, and deals. He showed me fake reports and made me believe everything was on track. But slowly, small things started to bother me. He bought an expensive watch, started wearing designer suits, and even changed his car. When I asked where the money came from, he told me his business was finally paying off. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Love makes you blind to things you don't want to see. Then one day, I opened a letter from the bank addressed to both of us. My heart sank as I read the words. The account that held my inheritance was completely drained. I couldn't breathe. I waited for Nathan to come home and showed him the letter. He didn't even look surprised. He said, "You told me to handle it. It's our money, remember?" That was the moment everything inside me broke. He had taken what my father left me, what I had trusted him with, and used it to build his own lifestyle. I packed my bags that night and left. I stayed with my friend Lily, who helped me find a job and get back on my feet. Every night, I replayed everything in my mind, the promises, the lies, the way he smiled while spending what wasn't his. I cried, but then I started to think clearly. I couldn't get my father's money back, but I could make sure Nathan never got away with what he did. I began learning about finances, contracts, and investments, the very things he had used against me. I didn't tell anyone my plans. I stayed quiet, patient, and determined. I realized that revenge doesn't always have to be loud or violent. Sometimes, it's about rebuilding yourself so strong that the person who destroyed you has to watch you rise. Nathan thought he had taken my future, but what he really did was create a version of me that would one day take his. After my father's funeral, I felt completely lost. He had been my rock, the one person who always believed in me. A week after we laid him to rest, the lawyer called me in for a meeting. That's when I learned my father had left me $380,000, every bit of savings he had built over his lifetime. I remember sitting there, staring at the numbers, feeling a mix of gratitude and guilt. My dad had worked so hard for that money, and now it was my responsibility to use it wisely. Nathan was the first person I told. He hugged me tightly and said, "Your dad would be proud. We'll make this money work for your future." His words felt reassuring, like I wasn't alone in figuring it all out. He talked about investing in real estate, stocks, and maybe even opening a small business. He sounded so confident, so sure of what he was saying. I didn't know much about investments, but I trusted him completely. He was my fiancé, the man I planned to spend my life with. A few days later, we went to meet a financial advisor. Or at least, that's what Nathan told me. The man he introduced me to didn't ask many questions. He just nodded and agreed with everything Nathan said. Looking back now, I realize it was all part of his plan. But at that time, I was just relieved that Nathan was handling everything. I thought I was lucky to have someone who cared enough to help me through such a difficult time. Nathan suggested we open a joint investment account. He said it would be easier to manage the funds together, and I wouldn't have to stress about the details. I hesitated for a moment, but he looked at me with that calm, convincing smile and said, "Emily, I'm doing this for us, for our future." So I signed the papers. I didn't even read all the details. I just wanted to trust him. In the following weeks, Nathan became more focused on business. He stayed up late, made phone calls, and carried his laptop everywhere. Whenever I asked questions, he said he was studying markets and managing deals. It sounded complicated, so I let him handle it. I wanted to believe that he was doing it all for us, just like he promised. Sometimes, he would talk about how proud my dad would have been to see us planning a strong financial future. I remember how warm that sounded, like he truly cared about honoring my father's memory. It made me feel safe. I had no reason to doubt him then. Looking back now, I can see how easily I let him take control. It wasn't because I was careless. It was because I trusted the wrong person. My father's inheritance was supposed to secure my life, but by putting it in Nathan's hands, I unknowingly gave him the power to destroy it. A few months after I handed Nathan control of my inheritance, things started to feel different. He became busier, always talking about new projects and business partners I had never heard of. He started dressing differently, wearing tailored suits and expensive watches. At first, I was happy for him. I thought his plans were finally paying off and that our future was getting brighter. But slowly, the excitement turned into confusion. One evening, Nathan pulled up in a new car, a sleek black Mercedes. I remember standing in the driveway, staring at it in disbelief. He smiled and said, "It's a company car, babe, a reward for how well things are going." I wanted to ask more, but he looked so proud that I stayed quiet. That became a pattern. Every time something didn't add up, I convinced myself I was overthinking it. Soon, he started taking trips to Miami. He said he was meeting investors, making deals, and growing our portfolio. He'd call me from hotels, talking about how hard he was working for us. But his tone began to change. He grew distant, impatient, and sometimes even irritated when I asked simple questions. Once, when I asked about the account balance, he laughed and said, "You worry too much. Trust me, it's all part of the plan." One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning the house when I found a stack of unopened mail on his desk. Nathan usually handled all our financial documents, but something made me pause. I picked up one envelope addressed to both of us from the bank. My hands shook as I tore it open. The letter stated that the joint account balance was zero. Not a few thousand missing, completely empty. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and my knees went weak. I reread the letter over and over, hoping I was misunderstanding it. But the numbers were right there, staring back at me. The inheritance my father had left me was gone. Every single dollar. When Nathan came home that night, I confronted him. I showed him the letter and asked what was going on. He didn't even look guilty. Instead, he smirked and said, "Why are you being so dramatic? I used the money for us. It's investments, Emily. You wouldn't understand." His voice was calm, but cold, like he had rehearsed the line. I told him he had no right to use the money without telling me, and he snapped. "You signed the papers, remember? It's our account. I can use it how I see fit." Those words hit harder than anything else. That's when I realized he wasn't the man I thought he was. I didn't cry that night. I just sat there, staring at him, trying to understand how the person I trusted the most could betray me so easily. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was my father's last gift. And Nathan had taken it like it meant nothing. That was the moment something inside me broke quietly, but completely. When Nathan told me the money was ours, something inside me froze. His tone was calm, almost casual, like what he had done wasn't wrong at all. He leaned back on the couch, smirking as if I was overreacting. I stood there, holding the bank letter in my shaking hand, and asked him again where the money had gone. He shrugged and said, "You gave me permission, Emily. You signed the papers. It's our money now." Those words echoed in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I couldn't believe that the man I had trusted, the one I thought would protect me, was standing there justifying what he had done. I remember staring at him, trying to find even a hint of guilt or regret on his face. But there was nothing. He looked completely at ease, almost proud. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. I hoped there was some mistake, that maybe the letter was wrong. I sat across from the banker, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. After checking the records, she looked at me gently and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but your fiancé had full access. You both signed the agreement. There's nothing we can do." Her words shattered the small bit of hope I had left. I had trusted Nathan so much that I didn't even realize I had legally handed over control. Everything my father had left, the house deposit, the college fund, the emergency savings, was gone. I felt sick. I walked out of that bank with tears running down my face, feeling smaller than I had ever felt before. When I got home, Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. I asked him if he understood what he had done to me, what he had taken from my family. He didn't even look up. He said, "You'll thank me one day when my business takes off. You're being too emotional right now." That sentence cut deeper than anything else. I realized he didn't see me as his partner anymore, just as a resource he could use. The love, the promises, the future we talked about, none of it was real. He had been playing a role, and I had fallen for it completely. That night, I packed a small bag and left. I didn't even know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I walked out of that house with nothing. No money, no car, no stability. Just my name and the memory of a father who had worked his entire life to give me a future I no longer had. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my friend's car, staring out the window, replaying every moment, every lie, every smile. The truth hurt more than I could bear. Nathan hadn't just taken my money. He had taken my trust, my peace, and the last connection I had to my father. When I left Nathan's house that night, I had nowhere to go. I called my best friend, Lily, and without asking many questions, she told me to come over. She opened her door and hugged me the moment I arrived. I tried to hold myself together, but as soon as she asked, "What happened?" I broke down completely. The weight of everything I had lost crashed over me all at once. The first few weeks at Lily's apartment were a blur. I couldn't eat much, and sleep was nearly impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face, calm and smug, as if stealing my inheritance was no big deal. I replayed our conversations in my head, wondering how I missed all the signs. Some nights, I sat by the window for hours, staring into the dark, asking myself why I trusted him so easily. Lily tried to cheer me up. She made me tea, cooked for me, and even got me to go outside for short walks. But deep inside, I felt empty. I had nothing left, no savings, no direction, no energy to start over. The humiliation burned the most. Everyone thought Nathan was a successful businessman, and I was the lucky fiancé who had it all. Meanwhile, he was spending the money that wasn't his. What hurt even more was seeing him flaunt his new life. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved into a penthouse downtown. He threw parties almost every weekend, showing off his hard-earned success. Pictures of him surrounded by expensive cars, and new people started circulating around town. It felt like the world was rewarding him for betraying me. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself that walking away was enough. But every time I saw his name or heard someone mention him, the anger inside me grew stronger. I wasn't angry because I wanted revenge. I was angry because he had destroyed my father's legacy and walked away without consequence. One night, Lily found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old picture of my dad. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me. That's when something inside me shifted. I realized that sitting there broken wasn't going to bring my father's memory back or fix what Nathan had done. My dad had raised me to be strong, not to let anyone define my worth. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to rebuild my life. I wasn't going to let Nathan's betrayal be the final chapter. The pain that had crushed me slowly began to turn into something else. Focus. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted to understand, to learn, and to fight in a way that would make him regret ever underestimating. That was the moment grief stopped controlling me. It became my fuel. Nathan thought he had taken everything from me, but he didn't realize he had also created the one thing that would destroy him, my determination. Starting over wasn't easy, but once I made up my mind, I refused to stop. I knew that if I wanted to take my life back, I had to build myself from the ground up. The first step was returning to school. I re-enrolled in the business management program I had dropped out of when I was with Nathan. Back then, I quit because he said he needed my help with his business plan. Now, I was doing it for myself and for my dad. Going back to college in my late 20s felt strange. Most of my classmates were younger, full of energy and ambition, while I carried the weight of regret and betrayal. But I stayed quiet and focused. Every class, every lecture, every late-night study session was a step toward taking back the control I had lost. I learned how money really worked, how people like Nathan could manipulate contracts, hide behind legal terms, and walk away untouched. The more I understood, the more I realized how blind I had been. But instead of hating myself for it, I used that guilt as motivation. While studying, I took a part-time job at a small finance firm. The pay was modest, but the experience was priceless. I learned about investments, asset management, and property laws. I spent hours after work reading case files and studying how businesses collapsed due to poor decisions or greed. I wanted to understand every loophole, every rule, and every way to protect what was mine. 2 years passed like a blur. My days were long, and my nights were filled with study notes and coffee cups, but I didn't complain once. Every bit of progress reminded me that I was no longer the broken woman Nathan had left behind. I was rebuilding piece by piece, quietly and steadily. Lily often told me she was proud, but I didn't want praise. What I wanted was peace, the kind that comes from knowing you can stand on your own. During that time, I started hearing about Nathan again. His so-called business was struggling. Some of his partners were backing out, and his lifestyle was catching up to him. It was strange how life worked. The same arrogance that made him think he was untouchable was now pulling him down. I didn't feel sorry for him. I just watched from a distance, calm and patient. I never called what I wanted revenge. I wasn't plotting to destroy him. I was preparing to reclaim the power he thought he stole from me. I knew I couldn't undo what had already been done, but I could restore balance, the kind that life eventually demands. By the time I graduated, I wasn't the same Emily who had cried over lost money. I was stronger, sharper, and ready for whatever came next. I had learned that sometimes justice doesn't come through anger or violence. Sometimes it comes through patience, knowledge, and quiet strength. Nathan had spent my inheritance, but I was learning how to spend my pain and turn it into power. By the time I finished my degree and settled into my job at the finance firm, I had completely rebuilt my life. I was stable, confident, and finally in control again. That's when I started hearing about Nathan. Mutual friends mentioned that his business wasn't doing well. The same man who once bragged about being unstoppable was now facing lawsuits, unpaid debts, and failed partnerships. I didn't smile when I heard it, but deep down I knew it was time. I didn't want to confront him directly or humiliate him in public. That wasn't my style anymore. I wanted to do it calmly, carefully, and in a way that would make him understand exactly what he had done to me. I knew how his company worked. He relied on other people's money to stay afloat. Investors had started pulling out, and he was desperate for financial backing. That desperation was my doorway in. Using the skills I had gained from my finance job, I created a new identity, Elizabeth Moore, a representative for a private investment firm. I set up a professional email address, business cards, and a company website that looked completely real. Every detail was perfect. I even practiced changing my voice slightly, making it sound older and more formal during phone calls. It didn't take long for Nathan to respond. When he received the email offering potential funding, he replied within hours. His tone was eager but polite. We arranged a few phone meetings, and I could tell from his voice that he was desperate for help. He talked about his company's temporary setbacks, and how a little financial boost would get him back on track. I listened carefully, taking notes, pretending to be interested, while inside I was steady, calm like I had rehearsed this moment for years. Over the next few weeks, we exchanged documents and proposals. I used all the legal and business knowledge I had gained to craft a deal that looked like salvation for him, but was designed to give me control once he signed it. Every word, every clause, every term was chosen carefully. If he failed to meet his obligations, which I knew he would, all his assets would automatically transfer to my company. Throughout our talks, I kept my emotions locked away. This wasn't about hate anymore. It was about closure. Nathan had once used my trust and signature to take what was mine. Now, I was using his greed and arrogance to take what was his. The day came when we finally met over a video call. He looked older, more stressed, but still carried that same overconfidence. He thanked Elizabeth for believing in his business and promised that this partnership would be worth it. I smiled behind the camera, knowing he had no idea who he was really talking to. When he signed the contract electronically, I sat there quietly, watching the confirmation pop up on my screen. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming feeling that everything had come full circle. Nathan had once taken everything from me with a signature, and now, with his own, he had handed me his future. The moment Nathan signed the deal, I felt a strange calm wash over me. From the outside, it had looked like I was offering him help, but every clause in that contract had been carefully designed to protect me. The assets of his company, everything from the office building to vehicles and equipment, were legally tied to my shell firm as collateral. He didn't see it, and he had no reason to suspect anything. In his mind, he had been given a lifeline. For the next few weeks, I watched quietly as Nathan continued running his business, thinking he had new support. He made big promises to clients, took loans, and bought more luxury items, all under the assumption that my investment would save him. He never once questioned the small terms buried in the contract, the deadlines he had to meet, or the automatic clauses that transferred control if he failed. Then came the day I had been waiting for. The conditions of the contract were met, exactly as I had planned. I didn't have to manipulate or threaten him. The law was on my side. With a few clicks, the documents were executed, and the ownership of his company, his cars, his office, and all tangible assets legally became mine. I wasn't hiding behind threats or lies this time. I was using knowledge, patience, and his own mistakes against him. Nathan called me the next morning, panicked. He had just discovered that all his company accounts were frozen, and his assets were being transferred. "What's happening? This can't be real," he shouted over the phone. I stayed calm and replied simply, "It's real, Nathan. Every single word you signed is binding. I suggest you read it carefully." For the first time, I saw fear in him. The confident, smug man who had taken my inheritance without hesitation was now powerless. He begged, pleaded, and even offered to give me money to reverse the deal, but it was too late. Legally, everything was already mine. I felt no joy in hearing his panic, only a quiet sense of justice. Overnight, Nathan's empire crumbled. Employees who once respected him called me for clarification. Creditors contacted me directly. Cars that were his pride sat in parking lots with my name now on the title. His penthouse, his office, his investments. Everything shifted legally into my control. He was left with nothing but his pride, which had been his undoing. It was a strange feeling to hold power over someone who had once controlled your life. I didn't gloat or celebrate loudly. I simply acknowledged that justice, when carefully planned and patiently executed, was far more satisfying than any moment of anger. Nathan had spent my inheritance recklessly, believing he would never face consequence. But I had spent years quietly preparing, learning, and building the tools to ensure that when the time came, he would finally face the balance he had ignored for so long. That day, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't need to be loud or chaotic. Sometimes it's a quiet, unstoppable force, and in Nathan's case, it was total. The moment I walked into his office under my own name, Nathan didn't recognize me at first. The calm, confident man who had once stolen my inheritance now froze. His face went pale, and for a second, I could see panic taking over. "Emily, this can't be legal," he stammered, his voice shaking. I walked slowly toward him, keeping my gaze steady. "Neither was stealing my future, Nathan," I said clearly, my voice cold but calm. "I just collected interest." He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't give him a chance to explain. There was nothing he could say that would fix the years of lies, betrayal, and humiliation. Nathan's hands shook as he tried to grab the contract papers on my desk, but I held them just out of reach. He started begging, his voice rising in desperation. "Emily, please. I didn't know. I can fix this. I'll give you money, anything." I didn't flinch. Every word, every tear, every plea was exactly what I expected. His arrogance had convinced him that he could charm or bribe his way out of any situation. This time it wouldn't work. He sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands, whispering apologies that came too late. I stayed standing, calm and controlled, remembering every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every tear I had shed while he flaunted my father's money. I had thought about this confrontation for years, imagining what I would say, how I would feel. Now that the moment had come, it was even more powerful than I had imagined. I reminded him of everything he had taken from me, the inheritance, my trust, the life we planned together. I didn't need to shout or yell. The evidence spoke louder than words. The contracts, the bank confirmations, the legal filings, all of it proved that what he had once believed he controlled was now under my authority. Nathan looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. He wanted to argue, to make excuses, but I had already won. His empire, once built on my father's money and his own arrogance, was gone. The properties, vehicles, and company assets now belonged to me. For the first time, I saw him completely powerless, the opposite of the man who had once seemed untouchable. I left him sitting there, shaking and broken. I didn't enjoy his suffering, but I recognized the satisfaction that comes from reclaiming control over your own life. I had lost money, yes, and I had been humiliated, but I had gained something far more valuable, justice, and the power he had thought he could never lose. As I walked out of his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nathan had spent my inheritance, but I had spent my time, my effort, and my focus to take something even more important. His power, his control, and the false sense of security he had built on my trust. And that, I knew, would never be returned to him. Today, my life is quiet, simple, and mine. I live in a small house by the coast, the kind I never thought I could afford after everything that happened. The mornings are peaceful, the waves calming, and I finally feel a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. I work honestly for everything I have, running a small investment consultancy for people who want to grow their businesses safely. Every client reminds me why I studied so hard and why I rebuilt myself from the ground up. Nathan filed for bankruptcy last year. I heard about it through mutual contacts, but I didn't feel the rush of satisfaction I imagined I would. Instead, I felt a quiet relief. He lost the empire he had built on greed and arrogance, and he had no one to blame but himself. Life had finally balanced itself in a way that was fair, and I didn't need to celebrate it loudly. The law had done what I could not do before, ensure that justice was served. Sometimes late at night, I think about the girl I used to be, the one who trusted too easily, who believed love was enough to keep someone on. That girl cried alone in Lily's apartment, broken and humiliated, unsure of how she would survive. I still feel a pang of sorrow for her, but I don't feel pity. She needed to exist so that the woman I am today could rise from the ashes. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear shaped the strength I now carry with me. I've learned that life is not just about money or revenge. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone take it away. Nathan took my inheritance, yes, but he also gave me something I could never have bought: the drive to become unstoppable, to educate myself, and to reclaim power that had been stolen. Every decision I made afterward was intentional, measured, and patient. I didn't act out of anger. I acted out of purpose. Now, when I walk along the beach in the early morning, I feel peace. I feel proud of the woman I've become. I didn't just survive betrayal. I turned it into a lesson and a strength. The world feels different now, calmer, yet richer, because I earned every bit of it honestly. He spent my inheritance, thinking it would define my life. But in the process of taking back what was mine, I spent his future. And unlike him, I did it with patience, skill, and integrity. That trade was worth every effort, every sacrifice, and every moment I doubted myself. I am free. I am strong. And I finally have a life that is truly mine.